I let my divorced sister join my honeymoon because she was depressed only to discover my husband and she had been having an emotional affair for a year. I never thought I would be writing this kind of post, especially not right after my wedding. The day was supposed to be perfect, the beginning of my new life with Larry, 32 male, my husband of 3 weeks. Instead, I, 28 female, found myself trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by my own mother Sophie, 54 female, and my sister Julia, 30 female. Larry and I met 2 years ago through mutual friends at a local brewery. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know my family. Our relationship moved quickly. We moved in together after 8 months and got engaged on our first anniversary. Throughout our relationship, Larry made an effort to be close to my family, especially my sister Julia. At first, I was happy about this. My previous boyfriend had been distant with my family, which caused problems. Julia had always been the golden child in our family. She married young to her college sweetheart Mark, and everyone thought they were perfect together. She had a successful boutique business, while he worked in finance. They were the couple everyone envied. But 6 months ago, their marriage fell apart when Julia discovered Mark had been having an affair with his coworker. The divorce was messy, with Mark trying to claim part of her business. It all started when my mom called me a week before the wedding. Julia had just finalized her divorce, and Mom kept insisting that Julia needed family support during this difficult time. I understood. Julia had supported me through my bad breakup years ago, staying up late to talk me through panic attacks and helping me rebuild my confidence. So, when Mom suggested making Julia my maid of honor despite her emotional state, I agreed. The wedding itself was beautiful. We had it at a vineyard outside the city, with string lights and flowers everywhere. Julia held it together throughout the ceremony, gave a touching speech at the reception, and seemed genuinely happy for me. Larry and I were set to leave for our 2-week honeymoon in Bali 3 days after the wedding. We had been planning this trip for months, saving up and arranging everything perfectly. We even splurged on a private villa with a pool and ocean view. The night before we were supposed to leave, Mom showed up at our house unannounced. She was crying, mascara running down her face, saying Julia had completely broken down and needed her sister. Then came the bomb. She wanted Julia to join us on our honeymoon. I thought she was joking at first. When I realized she wasn't, I flat out refused. This was our honeymoon, not a family therapy session. Mom wouldn't let it go. She kept talking about how Julia was in a dark place, how she found her crying in her car outside her empty house, how she was worried Julia might do something drastic if left alone. I stood my ground, explaining that while I cared about Julia, this was my honeymoon, a once-in-a-lifetime trip I'd been dreaming about. Then Larry stepped in, and to my complete shock, he agreed with my mother. He said we had a villa with extra rooms, and having Julia along wouldn't change our plans much. He even suggested she could do her own things during the day while we had our private time. The way he presented it made it sound so reasonable, like I was being selfish for refusing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own husband was taking my mother's side about our honeymoon. He kept listing all the ways we could make it work. Julia could take the second bedroom, she'd only stay for the first week, we could still have romantic dinners alone. The way he defended the idea made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting our honeymoon to ourselves. The argument got heated. Mom brought up how she and Dad helped pay for the wedding, implying we owed them this favor. She talked about family loyalty and how we needed to support each other in hard times. Larry mentioned that Julia had always been supportive of our relationship, planning my bridal shower and helping with wedding details. I felt cornered, outnumbered, and betrayed in my own home. The worst part was how they made me feel guilty. Mom reminded me of all the times Julia had been there for me, helping me through my breakup, lending me money when I lost my job 2 years ago, always being my biggest supporter. Larry kept saying it would mean a lot to him if I agreed, that it would show what a caring person I was. He even suggested it would make our honeymoon more meaningful if we could help my sister heal. I ended up agreeing, but I felt sick about it. That night, I barely slept. Larry tried to hold me, but I pulled away. Something felt off about how quickly he had sided with my mother, how prepared his arguments seemed. The next morning, Julia showed up with her bags packed, all smiles and gratitude. She hugged me tight and promised she wouldn't get in our way, but her suitcase told a different story. It was packed for a full 2 weeks, not just the 1 week they'd promised. The flight to Bali was tense. I sat next to Larry while Julia sat across the aisle, occasionally leaning over to chat with him about the travel magazine she was reading. She kept showing him pictures of places she wanted to visit, and he seemed more interested in her travel plans than in our own carefully planned honeymoon itinerary. At the resort, despite having her own room, Julia kept finding reasons to knock on our door. She wanted restaurant recommendations, help with her TV, opinions on her outfit. Sometimes she just wanted to talk about her feelings regarding the divorce. Larry always jumped to help her, leaving me feeling like a third wheel on my own honeymoon. I noticed other things too. The way Larry would check his phone and smile when Julia texted. How they seemed to have inside jokes I wasn't part of. The way Julia would touch Larry's arm when talking to him, and how he never moved away. Even at breakfast, they'd fall into deep conversations about books or movies, while I sat there feeling invisible. I'm writing this from the resort's beach bar while Larry and Julia are on a snorkeling trip I refuse to join. They tried to convince me to come along, but I couldn't bear another activity where I'd feel like an outsider in my own honeymoon. The whole situation feels wrong. The way Larry keeps checking on Julia, the way she seeks his advice about everything, the inside jokes they seem to share, it's all making me increasingly uncomfortable. I can't shake the feeling that there's something I'm missing here. Am I being paranoid? Should I confront them? I feel like my honeymoon has been hijacked, and my husband seems more concerned about my sister's emotional well-being than starting our married life together. Update 1. The rest of the honeymoon was worse than I imagined. After my last post, I started paying closer attention to Larry and Julia's interactions, and what I noticed made me sick to my stomach. The snorkeling trip that was supposed to last 2 hours stretched into 5. I spent those hours alone at the resort, calling their phones repeatedly with no answer. When they finally returned, they were laughing and sharing private jokes about some turtle they'd named together. Larry barely acknowledged my concerns about their late return, dismissing them with a casual "we lost track of time." That evening at dinner, things got even worse. We went to an upscale restaurant I had specifically chosen for a romantic dinner, one I had booked months ago as part of our honeymoon planning. Somehow, Julia knew about the reservation and invited herself along. The way she slipped into the seat next to Larry felt practiced, natural, like she belonged there. When the waiter came, Julia ordered for Larry without hesitation, his exact favorite dishes, right down to how he liked his steak cooked and which sides he preferred. She even knew about his shellfish allergy that he'd only discovered last year. When I questioned how she knew his preferences so well, they exchanged a look that made my stomach turn. Larry quickly explained that they had discussed food during wedding planning, but something about his explanation felt rehearsed, too smooth to be true. The rest of the honeymoon followed the same pattern. Julia was always there, at breakfast, by the pool, during our planned excursions. She even showed up at our couples massage, claiming she'd booked the third slot because she needed to relax. Larry never seemed bothered by her presence. If anything, he appeared more relaxed when she was around. Back home, things didn't improve. The intimacy between them became more obvious in familiar surroundings. They had inside jokes about places I'd never been to, referenced conversations I hadn't been part of. One evening, I found them in our kitchen, cooking together and laughing about some memory from before the wedding that I knew nothing about. I finally confronted Larry about the honeymoon. We were getting ready for bed, and I asked him directly why he had supported my mother's idea so quickly. He tried to brush it off at first, but when I pressed harder, he finally admitted that he and my mother had planned Julia's presence weeks before the wedding. He claimed he was trying to help Julia move on from her divorce, that she needed a change of scenery. When I pressed him about why he hadn't discussed this with me first, he got defensive and irritated. The truth came out in pieces over the next few days. Apparently, he and Julia had been having long conversations about her divorce for months. He said she opened up to him because she felt he understood her situation better than anyone else. This revelation hit me hard. My husband had been having intimate conversations with my sister behind my back, playing therapist while hiding it from me. One night, while Larry was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his phone. What I found made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Their text history showed daily conversations, often late at night, discussing deeply personal things that went far beyond normal in-law relationships. They shared jokes, articles, and photos I had never seen. Julia sent him pictures of herself at the beach, at work, random selfies throughout the day. Many of her messages ended with heart emojis, and Larry responded with similar emojis. The messages went back months, predating her divorce. They talked about everything, their dreams, fears, childhood memories. Larry had shared things with her that he'd never told me. There were messages about meeting for coffee, about keeping their conversations private to avoid unnecessary drama. They even had pet names for each other. When I confronted him with the messages, Larry exploded in a way I'd never seen before. He accused me of invading his privacy, said I was being paranoid and jealous. He defended his relationship with Julia, calling it purely platonic support for someone going through a tough time. But the way he protected their connection, the anger in his eyes when I questioned it, it all felt wrong. He was more upset about me discovering their messages than about how their relationship might affect me. Desperate for perspective, I called my best friend Anna. What she told me made my blood run cold. She had seen Larry and Julia having coffee together several times before the wedding, always at a small cafe on the other side of town, far from our usual hangouts. Once, she spotted them in deep conversation, Julia crying while Larry held her hand. When Anna asked Larry about it later, he claimed they were discussing wedding details. But why meet secretly? Why go somewhere so far from home? Why lie about it? Looking back at the honeymoon now, everything feels calculated. Every time Julia interrupted our private moments, every time Larry rushed to her aid, none of it was spontaneous. They had planned it all, using her divorce as an excuse to spend time together under the guise of family support. Even the way she packed for 2 weeks instead of one suggests they had discussed her staying the entire time, despite telling me it would only be a week. I feel like I'm going crazy. Every memory of our relationship is now tainted with doubt. How long has this been going on? How many other secret meetings were there? When did my husband and my sister become so close that they needed to hide their relationship from me? The weight of these questions is crushing me, but I'm even more afraid of the answers. Update 2. The truth is worse than I could have imagined. After spending days agonizing over everything I had discovered, I decided to confront Julia directly. I texted her asking to meet for coffee, purposely choosing a cafe different from the one where she used to meet Larry secretly. I arrived early and picked a quiet corner table where we could talk privately. Julia arrived looking nervous, which was unusual for my normally confident sister. She was fidgeting with her necklace, a habit from childhood that only surfaced when she was hiding something. Before she could launch into her usual cheerful act, I laid everything out: the secret meetings, the late-night texts, the honeymoon behavior, the lies about needing support for her divorce. Instead of denying it, Julia broke down. Her carefully maintained facade crumbled, and through tears, she confessed that she and Larry had planned everything together, long before the wedding. The honeymoon wasn't a spontaneous decision to help her through divorce. They had arranged it months ago, even before Larry suggested the specific resort to me. Her confession came in waves. She revealed that their emotional connection started during wedding planning, 6 months before the ceremony. What began as casual meetings to discuss flower arrangements and seating charts turned into deep conversations about life, relationships, and personal struggles. They found themselves sharing thoughts and feelings they had never expressed to anyone else. Julia admitted she felt a connection with Larry that she never had with her ex-husband Mark. The most devastating part was learning that Larry had serious doubts about our marriage weeks before the wedding. Instead of talking to me, his fiancée, he confided in Julia. They spent hours discussing his fears and uncertainties, with Julia offering support and understanding. My own sister helped my husband work through his doubts about marrying me, all while developing her own feelings for him. The divorce Julia was supposedly devastated about. It had been finalized months ago, long before she started acting broken and depressed. She had already moved on, but they used it as a convenient excuse to explain their closeness. Every tear she shed at family gatherings, every breakdown my mother reported, every moment of appearing vulnerable and needing support, it was all carefully orchestrated to manipulate me into accepting their relationship. Julia tried to justify their actions, saying they never meant for things to go this far. She claimed they fought their feelings, tried to maintain boundaries, but couldn't help growing closer. Apparently, they convinced themselves that as long as nothing physical happened, they weren't really betraying me. She even had the audacity to suggest that their emotional connection somehow made them better at supporting me. The more she talked, the more pieces fell into place. The way Larry always seemed to know about Julia's day before I did. How he could anticipate her reactions to things. The matching coffee cups I'd noticed in their social media photos, posted on different days to avoid suspicion. They had created an entire relationship parallel to my marriage, hiding in plain sight while everyone around them enabled their betrayal. When I confronted Larry with Julia's confession that evening, he didn't even try to deny anything. Instead, he tried to justify their deception. He claimed they never acted on their feelings physically, that it was just an emotional connection they couldn't help. He talked about how understanding Julia was, how she got him in ways I never could. His words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. Larry tried to argue that their connection had actually made him a better husband, that Julia had encouraged him to go through with the wedding despite his doubts. As if I should be grateful that my sister convinced my husband to marry me while they carried on their emotional affair. He seemed genuinely surprised by my anger, as if he expected me to understand and accept their special bond. The level of calculation involved in their deception is what haunts me most. They didn't just lie, they created an elaborate narrative that fooled everyone, including my mother. They used my sister's divorce as a smokescreen, manipulated family relationships, and turned my honeymoon into an opportunity to spend time together. All while making me feel guilty for having doubts about their relationship. Update 3. I moved out yesterday, taking only what I needed. After discovering the full extent of their betrayal, I couldn't spend another night in the house I once shared with Larry. Every room held memories now tainted by their deception. Even our wedding photos on the walls felt like props in their elaborate performance. The final straw came when I found their private chat history on Larry's laptop. They had created a separate messaging group just for the two of them, hidden under a fake name. The messages went back almost a year, filled with daily conversations, shared secrets, and plans for the honeymoon. They even joked about how well their plan was working, how no one suspected anything. Larry begged me to reconsider, claiming we could work through this in counseling. He followed me around the house as I packed, insisting their connection was purely emotional and that he had never physically cheated. As if the months of lying, the secret meetings, and the emotional intimacy they shared weren't just as damaging. He even suggested that Julia could cut contact with us completely if I gave our marriage another chance. Julia sent lengthy texts apologizing, saying she would distance herself from Larry if I gave my marriage another chance. She claimed she never meant to fall for him, that their connection just happened naturally. The audacity of her messages made me sick. She wrote about how sorry she was for betraying my trust, while in the same breath describing how special her bond with Larry was. But I couldn't get past the calculated nature of their deception. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had manipulated everyone around us to facilitate their emotional affair. My own mother, thinking she was helping Julia through a divorce, had become an unwitting accomplice in their scheme. They used her maternal instincts against her, playing on her concerns about Julia's mental health after her divorce. I filed for annulment this morning. My lawyer believes we have a strong case given the circumstances. Larry's premeditated deception about the honeymoon, coupled with evidence of his emotional affair with my sister, shows he entered our marriage under false pretenses. The documented timeline of their relationship, starting before our engagement, proves he never fully committed to our marriage. I blocked both Larry and Julia on everything: phone, social media, email. Larry tried to reach me through mutual friends, sending messages about how much he regrets hurting me. Julia attempted to visit my workplace, but security turned her away. I made sure everyone knew not to give them any information about me. Mom tried to play mediator until I showed her the evidence of their long-term deception. I forwarded her the screenshots of their messages, showed her the dates of their secret meetings, and explained how they had used her concern for Julia to further their agenda. She was horrified to realize how they had manipulated her maternal instincts for their own benefit. The family is divided. Some relatives think I'm overreacting to an emotional affair that never got physical. My aunt suggested I should be more understanding of Julia's vulnerability after her divorce. They don't understand that the betrayal isn't just about feelings, it's about the months of lying, the manipulation, the way they turned my honeymoon into an opportunity to be together. It's about how they use my family's trust against me. I don't want reconciliation. I don't want to hear their excuses or apologies. I'm done with their manipulative behavior and calculated deception. They can have each other, I'm done with both of them. Sometimes the cleanest break is the best solution. I've booked a solo trip to Bali next month, staying at a different resort. I'm going to replace the memories of my ruined honeymoon with new ones of my own making. Larry and Julia showed me who they really are, now I'm showing them who I am by walking away with my head held high. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, and I won't spend my life wondering when they'll do it again.